Corrupt cop and his associates held woman hostage, unaware she was a skilled retired U.S. military. In the heart of Memphis, Tennessee, where the mighty Mississippi River cuts through a city both proud of its musical roots and burdened by hidden shadows, a storm of betrayal brews. Tasha Wright, a seemingly ordinary woman caring for her aging mother, steps off a late-night bus, unaware that her quiet world is about to explode into chaos. Corrupt cop Gregory Dunn and his ruthless associates have set a trap for an easy target, oblivious to the fact that Tasha is no ordinary civilian. Behind her gentle smile and down-to-earth demeanor lies the strength and cunning of a highly skilled retired U.S. Army veteran who once trained at Fort Bragg. Memphis was a city of dualities. On one hand, the bright neon signs of Beale Street offered a sense of excitement and cultural richness. Echoes of B.B. King's guitar riffs still haunted corners of the lively nightlife scene. On the other hand, entire neighborhoods remained starkly cut off, riddled with poverty, crime, and corruption that festered in the dark. In the summer of 2023, this contrast was at its peak. Sirens screamed in the night and the humidity gripped every street and alley like a vice. Inside a cramped one-bedroom apartment in North Memphis, Tasha Wright flipped through an old photo album. She had spent years on the move, serving her country in distant lands. Now she was back where she started, caring for her ailing mother, Opal Wright. After completing her final deployment, Tasha chose early retirement rather than re-enlisting. She didn't regret her decision to come home and look after her mother, who was suffering from advanced rheumatoid arthritis and failing eyesight. But sometimes, particularly on nights when the humid wind carried the hint of stale whiskey and peppery barbecue, Tasha couldn't help but yearn for the clarity of military structure, knowing your mission, your objective, your enemy. In Memphis, though, it was harder to figure out friend from foe, especially when those wearing badges weren't always the good guys. Officer Gregory Dunn had been a rising star in the Memphis Police Department for years. He first joined straight out of the academy, dazzling supervisors with his sharp intelligence and calm under pressure. He had successfully navigated the labyrinth of district politics, garnering awards for courage on duty, though many close to him knew he had a special talent for stepping into the limelight at just the right moment. Over time, the city's underbelly sank its claws into him. It was subtle at first, a small bribe here, a overlooked piece of evidence there. Before long, Dunn found himself entangled with a local ring of criminals led by a man named Jericho Mills. Jericho ran a network smuggling drugs and stolen goods through the city's industrial corridors. Memphis, with its prime location along major highways, was the perfect waypoint. Dunn saw an opportunity to make easy money. He started feeding Jericho's crew inside information, tips on police raids, competitor drug stashes, and local informants whose tongues waggled too freely. In return, he received cash payments hidden in shoeboxes and wired to offshore accounts under a false identity. He also got a share of the stolen goods, which he'd resell for profit. As the years passed, Dunn refined his side hustle. He formed a small circle of men he trusted. Ex-cop Randall Banks, who'd been forced out of the force after a suspicious shooting, a muscle-bound enforcer named Kurt Brickhouse Waller, and Dion Price, a fast-talking hustler who specialized in forging official documents. This group functioned like a mini-syndicate, operating under the cloak of Dunn's badge. For a while, everything ran smoothly. Dunn presented himself as a dedicated policeman by day, while orchestrating robberies and facilitating extortion schemes at night. But he had grown arrogant, and arrogance often leads to sloppy mistakes. His thirst for power led him to attempt bigger hauls and riskier jobs. The lines between his official police work and his criminal undertakings blurred dangerously. Tasha's world intersected with Dunn's on a sweltering July night. She had just returned from the local VA hospital, where she was picking up medication for her mother. The city bus hissed to a stop, and Tasha disembarked, stepping into the thick, stagnant air. She wore a loose-fitting olive green t-shirt, a casual nod to her military days, and practical jeans. Her hair was tied back in a short ponytail, and a small backpack held her mother's prescriptions along with her old, battered copy of The Art of War by Sun Tzu, an ironic companion she often carried for comfort. Tasha never suspected she was being watched. A dull silver sedan idled across the street. Inside sat Dion Price. He was on an errand for Dunn, scout for an easy mark. Times were lean, and Dunn's crew was desperate for a quick score. They'd pick a random pedestrian who looked vulnerable enough to rob, or maybe kidnap for ransom if they were feeling bold. The corruption on the force allowed them to get away with brazen crimes. Dunn had half the precinct either complicit or too afraid to speak out. Dayon dialed a number on his burner phone. "Yo, I see a woman. She got that army t-shirt, but she looks real normal. Probably an ex or something," he reported. "All alone, sizing her up." On the other end, Dunn's cold, measured voice crackled. "Follow her. If she's alone, do it clean. Snatch her purse or maybe just bring her in if it looks like she has any connection to money. Or we can use her to set an example if she's got family. Up to you." Tasha glanced over her shoulder just once, a tingle of her old training telling her something was off. But the street was mostly empty, aside from an older couple arguing about the bus schedule. She walked quickly, stepping over cracked sidewalks, trying to reach her block before the sky unleashed its promised late-night thunderstorm. When Dayon revved the engine and slowly pulled up beside her, Tasha felt the hair on the back of her neck stand. She pivoted, adjusting her grip on her backpack, scanning for potential threats. But it was too late. Dayon had hopped out, brandishing a small pistol. He held it low near his hip, away from public view. "Hey, lady, how about we take a walk?" Dayon hissed, gesturing with the gun. Tasha's mind clicked into an old gear, a mixture of rational calm and coiled reflexes. Rule number 1 in hostage situations: if you're unarmed and outnumbered, you have to judge whether compliance might buy you time or whether you can disarm your aggressor safely. But Tasha had spotted a second figure moving between parked cars. That had to be Brickhouse looming like a giant shadow. He would close in if she tried anything rash. Cautiously, Tasha raised her hands. "All right, don't shoot." She kept her voice steady. She needed more intel. At least for now, cooperating was the best approach. After all, she was in enemy territory with minimal advantage. Dayon signaled, and Brickhouse shoved Tasha into the back of the sedan, slamming the door shut. The old Tasha, Sergeant Tasha Wright of the 82nd Airborne, parachutist and expert in close-quarters combat, was screaming from within. But for now, she was pinned. Memphis's endless grid of back streets and rundown neighborhoods provided the perfect cover for criminals like Dunn's crew. They drove to a ramshackle house in a nearly abandoned block, overgrown lawns and boarded windows marking it as a no-go zone. The sedan rolled past battered mailboxes with peeling numbers until it arrived at a property with tall, unkempt hedges. Tasha was dragged inside, backpack confiscated, forced to sit on a creaking wooden chair in what appeared to be a living room turned hideout. Yellowed wallpaper peeled from the walls, and a flickering overhead bulb cast ominous shadows. Jericho Mills, Dunn's boss on the street side, was there waiting for them. He was a wiry man with narrow shoulders and hawk-like eyes, dressed in a crisp black shirt that contrasted with the grime of the place. "So she's the one you picked?" Jericho asked, his voice condescending. Brickhouse nodded, crossing his arms. Dayon paced around Tasha, studying her face. "Is she worth anything?" Jericho continued, stepping closer to Tasha and tilting her chin upward with 2 fingers. Unflinching, Tasha stared back, forcing her expression to remain neutral. She wouldn't show fear. Fear was a predator's feast. "I don't know yet," Dayon replied. "We can call some numbers on her phone, see if she's got family with money. Maybe we can hold her for ransom or make her do something." Jericho smirked. "You'd be surprised how desperate folks can be around here to save a loved one. But you said she's ex-military?" "Retired, maybe," Dayon answered. "She was wearing an army t-shirt, could be nothing. Could be a problem if she's skilled." Jericho raised an eyebrow. "We'll find out." He turned away as if bored already. "Tie her up, toss her in the basement." We'll figure out what to do once Dunn gets here. That's when Tasha knew she had a window of opportunity. Being moved meant potential mistakes by her captors. She couldn't rely on them continuing to underestimate her if they realized the extent of her training. So she went limp, acting more fragile than she was. Let them think I'm docile, she thought, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The basement was a dank, spider-infested pit. It smelled of mold and stale water, with a single overhead light that buzzed like a dying insect. Brickhouse shoved Tasha down the creaky stairs, letting her stumble across the cement floor. He pointed his gun at her as Dayon tossed a coil of rope to him. "Make sure she can't break free," Dayon said. Tasha kept her limbs slack, acting submissive. Brickhouse bound her wrists behind her, not too gently, but he didn't pay enough attention to her ankles, opting for a simple loop of rope. Both men left, and Tasha heard the basement door slam shut. The click of the lock slid into place, but the muffled sounds of Jericho and the others remained overhead. Time to evaluate. Her pulse pounded, but her mind stayed clear. She tested the ropes around her wrists. The knots were tight, but she had learned a few infiltration and restraint escape techniques during her years of service. She also had a small advantage. Brickhouse had used one length of rope for her wrists and another for her ankles, meaning the two sets of restraints weren't connected. That gave her a bit more freedom to twist. While she worked her hands, Tasha took in her surroundings. There were crates stacked against the walls, possibly containing stolen items or contraband. There was a broken table saw in one corner, along with a pile of rotted wood. If she could free herself, maybe she could find a useful tool. Upstairs, muffled voices rose, and Tasha recognized a new speaker's tone. It was authoritative, but not Jericho's. The basement ceiling made eavesdropping difficult. But then, she heard the name Dunn. That had to be the corrupt cop they spoke about. "We have her phone. We'll see what she's worth," said Dayon, voice carrying through the thin floorboards. "Might have some valuable contacts or something." "Check if she's got any military buddies with deep pockets," another voice responded. Tasha assumed that was Dunn. "Or if not, we can always get rid of her. I'm not risking a trail back to us." Tasha's jaw clenched. So that was their plan. She was either a payday or a liability to be disposed of. She twisted her arms in the rope. Her memory drifted back to training sessions at Fort Bragg, where an old instructor named Staff Sergeant Miller had taught them how to dislocate a thumb to slip out of restraints in dire scenarios. Tasha grimaced. Could she do that here if push came to shove? Yes. But first, she'd try less painful methods. For nearly an hour, Tasha gradually loosened the rope, rotating her wrists just enough to open up tiny gaps. She needed to be patient and quiet, ignoring the pins and needles traveling up her forearms. Then she heard footsteps thundering down the stairs. Kurt Brickhouse Waller stood there holding a plastic water bottle. Behind him was Randall Banks, the ex-cop who looked perpetually on edge, as though he expected bullets from every angle. Brickhouse approached, unscrewing the cap and tilting water into Tasha's mouth with mechanical indifference. She sipped, but not too much. She didn't want to look ungrateful or strong, just plain docile. Randall hovered in the background, his posture stiff. "If she tries anything, I'll shoot," he muttered, brandishing a Glock 19. The brand was standard police issue, ironically turning on the same citizens it was meant to protect. Tasha's eyes flicked to the Glock. Noted. She coughed a bit to garner their pity. One more act. Brickhouse shrugged. "We'll see if she breaks. Jericho wants me to do some, convincing if she don't talk." Randall grimaced, betraying a flicker of discomfort. "We do what we have to. Dunn wants no loose ends." At that moment, Tasha almost pitied Randall. The ex-cop seemed conflicted, as though he'd fallen into this life out of desperation rather than cruelty. It could be a weakness Tasha might exploit. They left after a few minutes, having gleaned no valuable information, seemingly content that their hostage was compliant. Once the basement door slammed again, Tasha allowed herself a series of measured breaths. She had gained a valuable insight. Not all of them were equally heartless. In a crisis, that difference might be crucial. The next morning, far from the dilapidated house, an earnest detective named Angela Morton sat at her desk at the Memphis Police Department's downtown precinct. She was a rarity in the department, utterly incorruptible. She'd been quietly investigating suspicious patterns of tip-offs and unsolved cases that pointed to a mole in the ranks. A puzzling series of break-ins, robberies, and kidnappings had gone unconnected by official channels. But Angela sensed a thread tying them together. She sipped stale coffee while sifting through case files. Each incident had glaring signs of inside knowledge. Security cameras conveniently offline. Alarms disarmed with official codes. Yet every time she brought these concerns to her superiors, the conversation was quickly shut down. Perhaps it was a coincidence, or perhaps she was treading too close to some uncomfortable truths. Her phone rang, a private number. Angela hesitated, then answered. "Hello, Detective Morton." The voice was male, hushed. "I'm a concerned citizen. I have info about a group kidnapping people for ransom. One of them's a cop." Angela's heart pounded. "Who is this?" "Can't say. You were the only honest detective I could find. If you want to know more, check out the vacant properties near the old rail yard, the house with the broken gate. They got someone there. You'd better move fast. Otherwise, well, you know how these things go." The line went dead. Angela sprang into action. She requested backup from a trusted officer, Leon Clark, one of the few colleagues she felt sure wasn't on the take. Officially, she said they were checking out a tip about squatters. She didn't mention kidnappings or the rumor of a corrupt cop on the phone. In Memphis's labyrinth of partial allegiances, the fewer people who knew the truth, the better. Back in the basement, Tasha had managed to loosen her wrist restraints enough to reduce the circulation problems, though her hands still appeared tied. She couldn't risk fully untying them yet in case someone popped in. Instead, she tested small stretches, enough to confirm she could slip free when the time came. Soon, Dunn himself came downstairs, flanked by Jericho. Randall hovered behind them, arms crossed. Dunn was tall, his police uniform crisp. On the surface, he exuded that classic good cop presence, yet his eyes were cold, predatory. "Look at you, Miss Army," Dunn said. "We checked your ID. Tasha Wright. Fort Bragg, right? You're not some clueless civilian." Tasha glared at him. No use pretending now. They knew her background. "Never thought a Memphis police officer would be a traitor," she said, voice even. "You disgrace that badge." Dunn laughed humorlessly. "The badge is just a tool, like anything else. Now, how about you tell me if you've got family who can pay? We found your phone, but it's locked. We can crack it eventually, though. Better to make this easy." Tasha's mind raced. She had set a passcode on her phone, plus a biometric lock. They wouldn't easily get inside. She weighed her response carefully. If she pretended her mother was wealthy, they might try to extort her. But if they discovered Opal's financial situation, that might enrage them. She stayed silent. Jericho took a step closer, eyes narrowing. "We can do this the hard way." Dunn sighed in mock disappointment. "I'd prefer not to get messy, but if we have to. Randall here is used to making problems disappear, right?" Randall swallowed, a flicker of discomfort crossing his face again. Tasha noticed. Dunn, perhaps, didn't. "I'm retired military," Tasha finally said. "My mother's on disability. You won't get a fortune from me." Jericho smirked. "You'd be surprised what old army friends might cough up for your safe return. Or maybe we'll just kill you and move on," Dunn added. "Frankly, you're becoming a nuisance." Tasha weighed her options. Continue playing captive or attempt to strike now. She wasn't fully ready. 3 armed men in close quarters was still too great a risk. So she forced a resigned look. "Fine," she said. "I'll give you the phone password, but promise me you won't hurt my mother." Dunn motioned for Jericho to hold the phone out. "Let's see." Tasha gave them a fake passcode, hoping it might buy her time. Jericho typed it in. "No good, she's lying," he snapped. Dunn's eyes hardened. He nodded to Jericho. "Do what you must. We'll try again later." They stomped upstairs, leaving Tasha alone to brace for the possibility of torture. Her heartbeat thudded. but she inhaled deeply, focusing on her training. Fear was natural, but panic was lethal. Minutes later, Brickhouse came down, brandishing a length of thick chain. Tasha realized this was likely Jericho's idea of convincing. He strolled toward her with sadistic eagerness. "All right, soldier," Brickhouse said. "You want to play tough? Let's see how tough you are." He uncoiled the chain, the metal links scraping across the floor. Tasha's gaze darted to the top of the stairs. If she screamed, would the neighbors hear? Probably not in this forsaken block. Brickhouse swung the chain menacingly. Tasha stayed still, letting her body remain limp. But she was ready. Her wrists were loose in the rope. She braced for the first blow, ignoring the trembling in her stomach. She'd dealt with pain before. She just needed the right opening to fight back. The chain whipped downward, striking the floor near her ankles. A warning shot. He was savoring the intimidation. Tasha's mind flicked to her hand-to-hand combat training. She'd faced bigger men in the army. She knew that agility and strategy beat brute strength. Yet she was still bound, and he had a weapon. He raised the chain again. This time, Tasha angled her legs, letting the rope around her ankles take the brunt of the strike. The force stung, but the rope also partially protected her. She hissed in pain, playing up the injury. Brickhouse seemed gratified by her reaction. He paused to grin sadistically. "It doesn't have to be like this," she murmured. "I'm sure I can figure out a number to call." Brickhouse snorted. "That's right, Beg." He swung again, but this time Tasha yanked her wrists free from the rope and rolled sideways. Her sudden move caught him off guard. The chain clanged against the concrete, missing her. In one fluid motion, Tasha sprang up, ignoring the rope still at her ankles, launching a powerful elbow strike at Brickhouse's temple. Her blow stunned him, and he stumbled backward. The chain slipped from his grip. She quickly hopped over to him, the rope around her ankles preventing full mobility. But she managed to drive her knee into his stomach, forcing the air out of his lungs. Then she grabbed the chain. She knew she had mere seconds before someone heard the commotion. She looped the chain around his neck from behind, applying a chokehold. Brickhouse's eyes bulged. He struggled, but his large frame began to go slack. Tasha dropped him to the floor where he lay unconscious. She forced herself to push aside the wave of pity. This was life or death. Quickly, she tore at the rope around her ankles, freeing them at last. She rummaged through Brickhouse's pockets, finding a small folding knife. No gun, unfortunately. But she took the knife and eyed the basement door. If she rushed upstairs now, she'd face Dunn, Jericho, Randall, and possibly Dion. That was suicide. She needed a better plan or a diversion. Her eyes darted to the crates. Maybe she could find a weapon among the stolen goods. She pried open a small crate with the folding knife. Inside were electronics, tablets, phones, gaming consoles. Another crate contained random hardware. Then she opened one near the far wall, and her heart skipped. Firearms. Jericho's smuggling ring had them stashed. Tasha rummaged until she found a loaded 9mm pistol, a brand she recognized as a Smith & Wesson M&P 9. She checked the magazine. 8 rounds. Enough. She heard footsteps above. They were coming to investigate. She had to act fast or hide. Her military instincts took charge, an ambush scenario. She flicked off the overhead basement light, plunging the room into darkness. Then she ducked behind the crates, positioning herself for a clear line of sight on the stairs. Sure enough, the door flew open, and yellow light from above cast Dunn's silhouette on the stairs. "Brickhouse!" Dunn snapped. "Brickhouse, you down there?" No response. Tasha steadied her breathing, finger near the trigger. The slightest misstep could lead to a firefight. She realized with a pang that the muzzle flash and noise from a gun battle might alert the entire crew, but there was no turning back. Dunn started descending. Randall followed, flashlight in one hand, Glock in the other. Jericho remained at the top, gun drawn. Tasha's heart pounded. She forced herself to remain calm, letting them come closer. Dunn saw Brickhouse's unconscious body splayed on the floor. He cursed under his breath. "She's loose." In that moment, Tasha popped up from behind the crates. She fired twice, aiming low. Her shots slammed into Dunn's thigh and side. He dropped to the stairs, howling. Randall swung the flashlight beam toward her, but Tasha squeezed off another round. She missed wide, but the flash forced Randall to leap back. She ducked behind the crates as Randall returned fire. Bullets ricocheted off concrete, sending sparks flying. Jericho roared from the top of the stairs. "Kill her!" Brickhouse groaned, waking up in confusion. Tasha grimaced, realizing he might rejoin the fight. The situation was critical. She peered around the crate, seeing Dunn writhing in pain on the steps. Randall advanced carefully, muzzle of his Glock pointed toward her. Jericho waited up top, presumably covering the exit. Tasha took a deep breath. She counted bullets. She had fired 3. 5 left. Randall's Glock likely had around 15, but that was if the magazine was full. She had to use cunning. She spotted a stack of crates near the base of the stairs. If she could tip them over, it might create a barrier or distraction. Quickly, she slid across the floor, ignoring the stinging in her ankles from Brickhouse's earlier assault. She rolled behind the stack of crates and gave them a hard shove. The entire pile began to topple. Randall shouted, stumbling back as the crates tumbled down the stairs, some rolling into Dunn, who cursed in agony. Amid the chaos, Tasha sprinted to the side, where the basement's small, narrow window sat. The glass was grimy, barred from the outside. She was trapped unless she could remove the bars or get past Jericho upstairs. Jericho, hearing the ruckus, fired blindly into the basement. Bullets cracked overhead. Tasha ducked behind a support pillar. She needed a new plan. Then she heard sirens. They were faint, but growing louder. Did someone call the police? If so, it might be more of Dunn's crooked men, or it might be actual honest cops responding to a tip. She couldn't assume friend or foe. Randall, pinned behind the half-collapsed crates, shouted to Jericho, "We gotta go. That's the cavalry coming, or the real cops. Dunn's hit." Jericho cursed. "Grab Dunn and get to the cars. Dion, get Tasha if you can, but we're leaving." In that instant, Tasha recognized this was her best chance. The criminals were distracted. She dashed toward the stairs. Randall, seeing movement, fired 3 rounds, each zinging off the wall. Tasha raised her pistol and returned 2 shots. One struck the railing, the other hit Randall's shoulder. He yelped, dropping his flashlight as he collapsed onto the stairs. Jericho fired down at her, but Tasha ducked to the side. Brickhouse, still dazed, tried to stand. Tasha kicked him hard in the ribs as she passed, ensuring he stayed down. She approached Randall, pressing her gun to his chest. Blood trickled from his shoulder. He trembled, eyes wide with fear. "Stay put," Tasha hissed. She wasn't here to kill if she didn't have to, but she wouldn't let him raise his gun. She kicked it away, then hurried up the stairs. Jericho had retreated through the door, presumably to the main level. Tasha entered the living room, gun sweeping from left to right. Gunpowder lingered in the stale air. She saw a back door slamming shut. Jericho was escaping. As Tasha edged toward the front door, she found Dayon lurking near a window. He spun around, brandishing a pistol. She fired first, the bullet clipping his arm. He screeched, dropping the weapon, and crashed into an old couch. Tasha advanced, snagged his pistol, and kicked it behind her. "I suggest you stay down," Tasha snapped. Dayon cradled his bleeding arm, eyes full of stunned disbelief. "What are you, a superhero or something?" he rasped. She ignored him and peeked out the front window. Jericho was running toward 2 cars parked in the street. Dunn's silver sedan and an older black SUV. Dunn was nowhere in sight, likely still incapacitated. Brickhouse was in the basement. Randall was wounded. Dayon was out of commission. Jericho might be alone out there, or there could be more men. Then Tasha spotted a police cruiser rounding the corner. Her heart lurched. This could be real backup or crooked cops. She had no way of knowing. She weighed her options, remain inside or slip out the back. She heard the cruiser skid to a stop. 2 figures emerged, Detective Angela Morton and Officer Leon Clark. Tasha didn't know them, but the way they moved, cautious, standard police procedure, gave her hope. Jericho fired at the cruiser. the bullets pinging off the hood. Angela and Leon dove behind the doors, returning fire. Tasha inhaled, kicked the front door open and joined the firefight from the porch. She saw Jericho pinned behind Dunn's sedan, exchanging shots with the new arrivals. Tasha raised her pistol and squeezed off 2 rounds. One shattered the sedan's side mirror. Jericho ducked, returning a volley at Tasha. She took cover behind the doorframe. The sirens grew louder, more vehicles converging. Jericho glanced around, realized he was outgunned, and sprinted for the SUV. He fired a last wild shot at Angela, who narrowly avoided it, then peeled away with screeching tires. "Freeze!" Angela yelled in futility, but Jericho was gone. Tasha raised her hands, stepping out onto the porch, the pistol pointed downward. "I'm not your enemy," she called. "I was kidnapped. The basement is full of suspects." Angela locked eyes with Tasha. Leon covered her. They recognized the scene's chaos. Bullet holes, wounded men moaning inside, and Tasha with a gun. Angela carefully approached, weapon still drawn. "Ma'am, put the gun down, nice and slow." Tasha placed the pistol on the porch, hands in the air. "I'm Tasha Wright. They kidnapped me last night." Leon peeked into the house, seeing Dayon and hearing Randall's groans. "We've got at least 2 injured suspects in here," he shouted to Angela. Within minutes, more squad cars and an ambulance arrived. Tasha felt an overwhelming wave of relief and exhaustion crash over her. She sank onto the porch steps, letting an EMT check her bruises. She gave her statement to Angela, recounting everything from the moment she stepped off the bus to the basement confrontation. She didn't omit Dunn's involvement, explaining that he was the ringleader in uniform. Angela's face darkened with anger at the mention of Dunn's name. It confirmed what she'd suspected all along. There was rot in the department. "Where is Dunn now?" Angela asked. "In the basement, wounded," Tasha said, wincing as the EMT cleaned a laceration on her arm. "He got shot in the leg and side. Randall's also shot in the shoulder. Dayon is in the living room, shot in the arm." Angela radioed for more paramedics and an immediate cordon of the property. She and Leon carefully descended the basement stairs, guns drawn, to find Dunn and Randall. Both men were lying amid the scattered crates, still conscious, though Dunn was losing blood fast. Angela knelt and disarmed them, calling for the paramedics to come down. Dunn glared up at Angela, spitting out a curse. She stared right back, no pity in her eyes. "Gregory Dunn, you're under arrest," she said coldly. "For kidnapping, attempted murder, corruption, and that's just the start." Dunn tried to speak, but only a strangled gasp emerged, his bravado gone, replaced by agony. Randall just stared at the ceiling, as if wishing it was all a bad dream. Upstairs, Tasha listened to the controlled chaos. A swirl of uniforms, paramedics, questions, evidence photos. She let them do their work, letting the heaviness of relief settle in. With Dunn and most of his crew in custody, the immediate threat was over. But Jericho was still out there. Hours later, Tasha stood outside the battered house, leaning against the hood of a police cruiser. The sun was setting, painting the Memphis sky in hues of purple and orange. Detective Morton approached, crossing her arms thoughtfully. "You'll need to come down to the station to give an official statement," Angela said gently. "Also, we'll help you get your phone back and see if any of your personal items were stolen." Tasha nodded. "Of course. Thank you, Detective. You saved my life today." Angela managed a small smile. "Actually, Miss Wright, you saved your own life. We just helped at the end." They shared a moment of mutual respect. 2 strong black women, each fighting corruption in their own way. Leon approached, phone in hand. "We got ID confirmations on all the suspects. Dunn's injuries aren't life-threatening, but he'll be in the hospital for a while. Randall, too. Dayon has already started giving up details on Jericho in exchange for a plea deal. Looks like the department's about to get a serious shakeup." Tasha exhaled, the tension of the day slowly draining. "What about Jericho?" Angela shook her head. "He got away, but now that we know who he is, we'll find him. Your testimony about his operations will be invaluable. We're also searching the property for evidence of other crimes. Meanwhile, we'll get your mother to a safe place." Tasha felt a rush of gratitude. Thank you, Detective. Angela placed a reassuring hand on Tasha's shoulder. It's my job, but watch your back. Jericho might try to retaliate. Over the next week, Tasha was busy giving statements, meeting with internal affairs investigators, and protecting her mother. The story blew up in the local news. Corrupt cop exposed in kidnapping ring, read the headline of the Commercial Appeal. The city buzzed with outrage, forcing the police chief to hold press conferences addressing the systemic corruption. For Tasha, each day was a whirlwind. She was called a hero, though she felt more like someone who just barely survived. She knew the scars, both physical and mental, would linger for a long time. Her mother, Opal, cried with relief when Tasha finally returned that first night, battered but alive. "Lord, my baby," Opal whispered, hugging Tasha fiercely. Tasha teared up, though she kept it together. She didn't want to worry her mother more than necessary. Angela Morton visited Tasha's apartment a few times, accompanied by other honest officers, to discuss the ongoing case. She gave Tasha updates. Dayon was cooperating fully, revealing addresses of stash houses and implicating more crooked officers. Randall, for his part, was borderline catatonic, but he'd confirmed Dunn's role in orchestrating countless crimes. Dunn faced multiple felony charges. Jericho was still at large, though there were leads in Arkansas and Mississippi. Despite the progress, Tasha didn't feel entirely safe. Jericho was the type to hold grudges. She started varying her routines, using different stores, changing bus routes. The VA hospital visits for her mother's prescriptions became tense affairs, with Tasha scanning the surroundings for suspicious faces. Yet life had a way of moving forward. Bills still had to be paid. Groceries still had to be bought. Day by day, Tasha inched back toward normalcy, though normal now included being armed with a small .380 pistol she legally obtained. Angela had nudged her toward the right channels for a concealed carry permit, understanding Tasha's unique situation. One afternoon, 2 weeks after the rescue, Tasha was stepping out of a small corner store with a bag of groceries when she felt a piercing stare. She glanced around. A black SUV. Familiar. She froze. It was Jericho's vehicle, or one just like it parked down the street. Her breath caught. She needed to confirm if it was him. As discreetly as possible, she moved to a vantage point behind a large parked truck. She peeked around. The SUV tinted windows hid the driver from view. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. She quickly checked it. An unknown number calling. Heart hammering, she answered, keeping her eyes on the SUV. "Hello?" A low voice replied. "You thought we were done?" She recognized Jericho's sneering tone. "You're making a mistake calling me," she said calmly, forcing down the surge of adrenaline. "Dunn might be finished, but I'm not. You cost me a lot, Miss Wright. You can bet you'll pay." The call ended abruptly. The SUV roared to life and peeled away. Tasha inhaled deeply. If Jericho was personally stalking her, the threat was real. She headed straight to the precinct to inform Angela. After hearing Tasha's account, Angela launched an immediate investigation. Patrol cars began frequent drive-bys of Tasha's apartment. The department also arranged an emergency safe house for her and Opal. But Tasha had a stubborn streak. She was tired of running. Still, safety for her mother came first. Opal was temporarily moved to a facility with better security, under the guise of advanced medical care. Tasha made sure her mother understood it was for her own protection. Then Tasha made a bold decision. She offered to assist Angela in taking Jericho down. She knew his tactics, had been inside his operation, and suspected he would keep coming after her anyway. Angela was reluctant to involve a civilian, but Tasha argued that her military background made her more than capable. Eventually, Angela agreed to let Tasha act as a consultant, albeit unofficially. They pored over maps of the city, marking Jericho's known hideouts. They cross-referenced phone records from Dayon's confiscated devices. Each lead they followed either led to a dead end or had Jericho's footprints, but always a step behind him. Days turned into a tense cat-and-mouse chase. Jericho made taunting calls to Tasha's phone at odd hours, leaving cryptic messages about how she had no idea who she was dealing with. Tasha refused to be intimidated. She stepped up her training regime, running early in the morning, practicing at the shooting range with guidance from Angela. Her old army reflexes began to resurface in full force. A break finally came when a minor player in Jericho's ring was arrested trying to smuggle firearms across the state line. This man, sweating under interrogation, gave up the location of a secret warehouse on the outskirts of Memphis near the industrial park. He claimed Jericho was moving his operation there to avoid the intensifying police crackdown. Angela organized a multi-unit raid. Tasha accompanied them in an unmarked SUV, wearing a bulletproof vest. She insisted on being part of it. Jericho had made it personal, and Angela allowed it under the strict condition Tasha follow her lead. Just before dawn, a convoy of police vehicles approached the warehouse. They parked half a block away, moving in silently on foot. The plan was to surround the building, block all exits, and force Jericho's crew to surrender. But Jericho was cunning. The moment the first officer stepped on the gravel, a guard dog inside began barking furiously. Floodlights erupted around the warehouse and muzzle flashes tore through the dim sky. Jericho's men were ready, firing from the windows. The police ducked for cover behind concrete barriers. A full-fledged shootout erupted. Tasha took cover behind a police SUV, scanning the windows. She spotted Jericho at a second-floor window, shouting orders to his men. Angela signaled for a flanking maneuver. Tasha nodded, heart pounding, as she joined a squad of officers circling to the rear entrance. Gunfire cracked in the early morning air, the smell of cordite stinging Tasha's nostrils. She crouched low, following Angela and Leon. Another policeman took point, blasting the door hinges with a shotgun. The door swung open, revealing a large interior cluttered with wooden pallets and crates. They entered swiftly, weapons up. Jericho's men opened fire from behind stacked boxes. The officers returned fire, bullets zipping across the space. Tasha advanced, stepping in time with Angela, covering each other's angles. Her mind was eerily calm, as though she were back on a mission overseas. Shots echoed off the metal walls. Tasha spotted a figure sprinting toward a side staircase. Jericho. She peeled off from the group, determined to follow him. Angela shouted, "Tasha, wait!" But Tasha was already moving. Jericho darted up the stairs to the second level, which overlooked the warehouse floor. Tasha pursued, weaving between crates. She heard footsteps behind her, Leon perhaps providing backup. She reached the top floor, scanning for Jericho. The catwalk was dimly lit, making visibility difficult. She inched forward, gun raised. Suddenly, Jericho burst out from behind a steel support beam, firing wildly. Tasha dropped flat, returning fire in short bursts. Jericho cursed, ducking behind a cluster of crates. They were locked in a deadly standoff. Tasha's ears rang from the echoes. She steadied her breath, remembering her army training. Never let adrenaline override tactics. "Come out, you coward," Jericho taunted, voice echoing. "Your time's up." Tasha crept along the catwalk, stepping carefully so as not to make noise. She heard scuffling footsteps, realized Jericho was trying to flank her. She spun around, weapon at the ready. Jericho emerged, gun raised. They fired simultaneously. Tasha felt a searing pain graze her left arm, but she managed to squeeze off a shot that hit Jericho in the chest. He staggered backward, shock painted across his face. She advanced, gun trained on him. Jericho dropped to his knees, blood spreading over his black shirt. He tried to raise his weapon, but Tasha kicked it away. "It's over," Tasha hissed. Jericho looked up at her with a sneer. You think I'm the only one? This city's rotten, more than you know." Tasha didn't falter. "Maybe, but one piece of rot is gone." She kept her gun on him until Angela and Leon rushed up, handcuffs ready. Jericho was done. His threat ended. After the raid, the city reeled from the shockwaves. Jericho's network was dismantled, exposing a web of criminal deals that spanned beyond just Dunn's crew. Local politicians scrambled. The police chief was forced to resign, and multiple investigations commenced to purge the Department of Corruption. Gregory Dunn, from his hospital bed, watched the news coverage of Jericho's capture. He knew he was finished. Charges piled up, ensuring he'd spend the rest of his life behind bars. Hard karma had come for him in the form of a bullet, an exposed ring, and a brave soldier who refused to be a victim. Brickhouse, Dion, and Randall each faced their own reckoning. Brickhouse was indicted on multiple assault charges. Dion's cooperation earned him some leniency, but he still faced prison time. Randall, haunted by guilt, gave a full confession, unraveling the entire tapestry of Dunn's corrupt dealings. For Tasha, the aftermath was bittersweet. Her physical wounds healed quickly, thanks to her strong constitution and thorough care. The mental scars, abduction, fighting for her life in that grimy basement, would linger. She sought therapy through the VA, determined not to let the trauma define her. She also found a renewed sense of purpose. She'd confronted evil in her hometown and emerged stronger. Opal improved too, relieved that her daughter was safe. The city's wave of reform led to better medical support for veterans like Tasha and safer communities for the vulnerable. Detective Angela Morton was hailed as a hero within the reformed ranks of the Memphis Police Department, eventually promoted to lead a new anti-corruption unit. She and Tasha stayed in touch, forging a friendship born from shared danger. In the weeks that followed, Tasha found herself on local news channels, her story inspiring others to stand up against injustice. Neighbors she barely knew offered words of gratitude and support. Strangers wrote letters, thanking her for her bravery. It was strange being in the spotlight, but Tasha handled it with humility. She downplayed her heroics, attributing her survival to her army training and the timely intervention of Detective Morton and the honest officers. Still, she agreed to speak at a youth center in her old neighborhood, hoping to steer the younger generation away from gangs and violence. On a warm Sunday afternoon, Tasha visited the Mississippi riverbank, the city's skyline shimmering in the distance. She closed her eyes, letting the breeze brush against her skin. She remembered the day she was kidnapped, how powerless she felt. And she remembered how her training, grit, and spirit helped her take that power back. Life was unpredictable, dangerous even, but Tasha Wright had faced darkness and emerged a victor. For every bit of corruption that existed, there were also good people. Angela, Leon, the honest men and women in uniform, willing to fight back. As she stood by the water, she reflected on Jericho's final words about the city's rot. Evil was a tenacious enemy, yet she firmly believed that with enough light, any darkness could be driven away. Her phone chimed, a text from Angela, updating her on new arrests linked to Jericho's case. Yes, Tasha thought. The fight continued, but progress was being made. With a steady gaze at the horizon, Tasha turned away from the river and walked back toward the heart of Memphis, determined to carve out a better future for herself, her mother, and the city she called home. That's the unbelievable journey of Tasha Wright, a skilled retired U.S. Army soldier forced to confront a corrupt cop and his criminal associates in the underbelly of Memphis. It's a story of unimaginable betrayal, unshakable courage, and ultimately, the triumph of justice over darkness. Tasha's strength reminds us that ordinary people can become extraordinary heroes when pushed to the brink. Corruption, no matter how deep its roots, can't stand against those who are willing to shine a light upon it. If you found this story riveting and inspiring, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. By doing so, you help spread the message that no matter how dire the circumstances, hope and determination can prevail. Together, let's encourage more stories of resilience and stand up against wrongdoing. Thank you for joining us on this thrilling journey. Stay tuned for more incredible true-to-life tales. That's the unbelievable journey of Tasha Wright, a skilled retired U.S. Army soldier forced to confront a corrupt cop and his criminal associates in the underbelly of Memphis. It's a story of unimaginable betrayal, unshakable courage, and ultimately, the triumph of justice over darkness. Tasha's strength reminds us that ordinary people can become extraordinary heroes when pushed to the brink. Corruption, no matter how deep its roots, can't stand against those who are willing to shine a light upon it. If you found this story riveting and inspiring, Please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. By doing so, you help spread the message that no matter how dire the circumstances, hope and determination can prevail. Together, let's encourage more stories of resilience and stand up against wrongdoing. Thank you for joining us on this thrilling journey. Stay tuned for more incredible true-to-life tales.